So welcome. Jayme Hernandez here, founder of Breakthrough Yoga Coaching Method. This is take two, and I am here to help you with bridging the gap between your spiritual practice and your business so that you can grow emotionally and financially. And today's guest has been on that journey with me, part of my journey as helping me along the way through my spiritual journey, through my business journey. And her expertise and her specialty is branding because she's a branding coach. And today we're talking all about that, how to position yourself as the expert through storytelling. So we want to make it really easy for everyone who is kind of figuring out, like, how the heck do I talk about myself in a way that positions me as an expert? So we're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to bring Brittany on, and I'm also going to read her bio. So let's bring her on now. This is a cool thing you can do is you can you're on live, and I did it wrong the first time, so now I'm doing it right. Yay! There's Brittany. Oh, and you have to put
Yay!
yay. Now you have to put
Okay.
your thing this way and
Oh
not this
no. Okay.
way.
So this will be interesting because let me do it. Oh no. That's okay. We're gonna have
Right,
fun
you're
today.
live. So that's the fun thing about being live. You start to see all of the technical stuff that happens
It
right in
works
front of you
so
guys.
easily on the test, right? Like it
I
was just
know, I
like
know.
switch to the phone and we got it and it's fine. But oh
So I want to
actually,
read your bio and I want to tell people about you, Brittany. So Brittany Love is a bilingual strategic brand storyteller, and she's a messaging coach who specializes in helping entrepreneurs find their purpose and tell their brand story in a way that is impactful and compelling. As the founder of Revolutionary Presence, which is her company, she brings her clients 20 years of ministerial experience and 7 years of marketing and entrepreneurial experience. She holds a master in of divinity, which that's interesting. I don't know anything about that, from Duke University, and is fluent in English and Spanish. So this is Brittany. Welcome, Brittany. And thank you for talking about positioning yourself as the expert through storytelling. And if anybody is here live, hashtag live, because we want to hear your questions and your comments. And if you're here for the replay, hashtag replay, because Brittany and I will answer them as soon as we see them. So let's get into it, Brittany. Positioning yourself as the expert through storytelling. What do we need to
yeah.
talk about?
Well, I am thrilled to be here with
Thank you.
a community of yogis, especially led by you, because I imagine that they're all so much fun. And I want to start by asking you a question because
Oh,
when I hear the position position yourself as an expert, I kind of get this like, ooh, expert. That's a really funny word. How do your people feel about the word expert?
well, thank you for asking that question because I think, and this is through my experience of working with my clients, sometimes we understand deep down that we are experts and at our bones, at our core. But when we start to actually position ourselves or put ourselves out there, all of a sudden there's this feeling of imposter syndrome where it's like, oh my God, but really, I'm really going to say I help people in business and spirituality. Like that was my issue, right? When I first started, I'm like, what is this thing about doing business? And so it's sort of like a for our people, it's really about understanding, like, what does that really mean, and how can we do that in a way that is not so scary and so like we feel like we're an imposter. And what I always tell our clients is, listen, all you have to do is share your experience, and the experience is through your professional experience. So that could be your trainings, all of your, I'm sure a lot of you out there have many lists of certifications, your personal experience, we all have a life experience, and your client experience, or those who you've worked with, right? In whatever capacity. And so basically you're sharing an experience. And so when you're sharing an experience, that is basically a story. And when you're sharing a story about your experience, then it becomes fact. So
Mm.
now we can get out of this like, oh my God, like I'm this yoga and I teacher and I've been teaching for 20 years and I have like 1,000 million certifications to like, I teach yoga and this is kind of what happens with me on my personal level. This is how I think, this is how what I feel and how I'm doing, and this is what's happening with my clients. So it kind of wakes some of our clients up to realize, oh right, I'm just sharing a story and it's actual fact. So I'm not actually positioning myself from some false imposter syndrome that seems to kind of come
Mm.
up when they start talking about themselves. So that's kind of how the deal is with us.
I love the way that you talk about that because the word expertise, I think that's even overwhelming to me sometimes, right?
Yeah,
Like, ooh, expertise. Like, am I the expert? And whether you call it imposter syndrome or whether you just call it, freaking out,
right.
I think, I think it's just one of those things where feeling like you have to be the expert can be very overwhelming. So I love how you break that down as just you're just sharing facts, you're just sharing stories. And that's what I really love about storytelling is that it gives you the opportunity to share facts in a way that actually connects on an emotional level, right? Like it's when you're sharing a fact, like 80% of people like Cheerios, or I don't know
Right.
if that's a true fact or not, but
Yeah, right.
if you share it like that, it's like, well, that's great. But then if you share like a commercial about Cheerios where they're eating and that's a story, where you see a kid eating and like saying,
The
Mom,
mom
I
runs
love these
in, something
Cheerios. Like,
happens.
yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's the story is what brings the fact to life.
Yes.
Um,
And we
and for
talk
you,
about this a lot, and I learned this with you and other coaches, where it's like, it's the difference between telling somebody like I am a yoga business coach to showing somebody. It's like, listen, I was on a call yesterday with one of my clients and he was freaking out because all of a sudden he had to like talk to his people, and he had to put his first like offer out there, and all of these things were going through his head, and so it feels different, right?
yes. Yes, I was going to say something like that too. Like, imagine if you were sitting in a yoga studio and someone started crying, and you're like, well, I have 200 hours of certification on yoga. Like people don't respond that way, right?
Right.
So, but if you could say, look, breathe through it. This is like your emotions coming out. Like, this is you connecting with a deeper part of you. That's a very different thing. And so when we do stories, we're kind of telling both sides of things, right? Like we're telling our experience, but we're telling it in a way that connects with the other person. And that's what makes them so compelling.
And you were telling me, like, because we talked about, like, why is it important, to for storytelling in our, like, why is storytelling important in our business? And you said something to me interesting yesterday, where um, it has you like feel a certain way, and you said something else, which is it feels a certain way, but also it helps you remember. And I think those two things, if we think of it from a marketing perspective, isn't that the most effective marketing, right? If I actually remember, like, oh yeah, yeah, there is that, yoga studio, or that, yoga teacher that I know, and last time I went in her class, I remember she helped me through the breathing. Oh yeah, that felt a certain way, and also I remember how I felt. So it's very different from I am the owner and founder of such and such to I felt it, and you know what? I remember it, and I actually want to continue that journey with that person.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I talk about stories, I say one of the biggest thing is it helps them know you. Like it's something, it's opposed to the, oh, I'm the owner of like, well, that's great. Like that's what you do. That's, you know, your title. But
Hmm.
what does that mean? What does it mean to be you as an owner? What does it mean to be you, Jayme, as,
Right.
the owner of this business? Like it helps them to really see you and know you and feel you in a way that just presenting a statement about who you are doesn't. And
Yeah.
so when we talk about it in the world of branding, we call building a brand. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that word can sound intimidating sometimes because you start thinking about logos and you start thinking about, websites and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
That is not even, that's like way farther down the line. You don't even need to think about that yet. Ultimately, a brand is really just about what mark do you want to leave on the world? It is like
Mm.
the stamp of authenticity saying, hey, this is Jayme made. This is how Jayme does business. This
Right.
is how Jayme teaches yoga and business as a discipline, as a spiritual practice.
Right.
Um,
And
yeah,
I think,
it's very
there's
different.
this like jargon where it's like you have to be like a unique and have a unique differentiator. But here's the thing about the differentiator. If I told you a story about me in my yoga practice and Brittany told you a story about her and her yoga practice, the very fact that we're telling the story and Brittany's telling it and I'm telling it differentiates us,
Yes.
right? So it's like we don't have to make up why we're special. We are just simply ourselves. And when we are ourselves, that nuance in the way I speak about my experience is very different from somebody else. So it's like that mark on the world, that authentic stamp is really like when you boil it down, it's really just being you. And the structure that we teach you guys is talk about your personal experience, talk about your well, I do it, sorry, professional experience, talk about your client experience, because then you're just sharing experience and that alone differentiates from you. Because I can teach exactly the same thing, like Brittany and I can both be branding coaches, but if she's telling me a story about her client and I'm telling you a story about my client, it will be completely different,
Yeah,
right?
we would probably attract different clients too, right? Like,
Exactly.
I'm thinking about I'm thinking about the way that I talk about branding. It is very different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't draw out the spiritual practice of it in the way that you do, but there is, I'm a spiritual person. So there is a
Yeah.
spirituality behind it. And it's that deep
Yes.
listening, that deep understanding of someone's kind of vocation, of their calling, that I am
Yeah.
listening for when I'm working with them so that they can draw out the best parts of themselves to share with the world, because that's ultimately what people want. People don't start businesses to feel like they're working for someone else. People start businesses to live their own unique purpose. And
Yes.
so it's really important to be intentional about it when you're building your business and when you're building your brand, that you're doing things in a way that feels like it's you. It
Mm.
feels like it's designed for you.
And like,
Yeah.
if we were to just like boil down, what, because I think people get really confused about branding in general. I think people
Hmm.
think they see a certain type of branding, like Lululemon, and they're like, oh my God, they're successful. They have a lot of clients. I must copy them. I must brand myself like the way they're branding themselves. But I think the way you teach it, Brittany, is like, what would you say exactly is branding so people can understand they don't have to be the next Lululemon, they have to be themselves? What would it be
Yeah,
that they
so it's
understand?
leaving your mark, not leaving Lululemon's
Right.
mark on the world. It's leaving
Right.
your stamp of authenticity, not Lululemon's stamp of authenticity. And I think
Right.
Lululemon's a great example. When they first came out on the market, they changed the world a little bit, because all of a sudden people thought, oh, why, there's a pair of yoga pants that cost $70. Like, what's this about? But
Right. All of us
but they
hippies.
yeah, but they explained it in a way that it actually drew people in. And so now Lululemon has like this reputation for quality. And I know that that branding can change over time. But this is the thing. When you hear Lululemon, you have a strong reaction, right? Like,
Yes.
one way or the other, you can love them or you can hate them, but you have a strong reaction. And I bet that if you're the type of person that buys from, Jayme's yoga pants down the street, which I don't think you
Right.
own a yoga pants business, but
Right.
you know, you
But if I
know,
had made them, for example.
yeah, if you're buying from like a local person who makes yoga pants, they also have a brand already. It's like, however, it is whatever mark of quality they have put on their stuff, whatever stamp of authenticity, and you have that connection with them. It's that connection that really builds the brand. You know, it's not what you put out there so much as like the relationship between you and your clients, the relationship between you and your customers.
And
It's
what I'm
a
hearing you say, and I think I've heard you said this to me, is like whether you like it or not, you are a brand. Like however you
Yeah.
present yourself, and you know, many of our clients, the first way they start presenting themselves is through their credentials, through their 500-hour teacher trainings, through their shamanic healing journeys, through all of these kind of experiences, and it kind of like they start to position themselves based on that versus really understanding the way I present myself is going to, and like in your words say, it's going to make you feel a certain way,
mm-hmm.
right? And so, you know, the you know, telling you that I have all this is experience is different from actually sharing your experience, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, because we're always going, people are always going to perceive us, you know, in a way whether we like it or not, right?
Oh
Then
yeah.
we may as well, like you said, be intentional about it. And like you said, it's like whether you like Lululemon or not, we also can't assume for our clients what your clients are actually going to perceive of you, because this is the other thing that starts to happen with our clients is that they're like, oh my, because I teach our clients how to sell their services at a premium, which means a high ticket, you know, 3K, 4K, 5K, 10K, you know, program. And most people are like, what the F? Like, what are you talking about? No one will ever pay that much for my services. And it's like, you're making an assumption that you don't even like know. Because what if you started telling your story and people are like, oh my God, she actually understands what burnout is. She actually understands what binge eating is. She actually understands what branding is. She actually understands what anxiety is or depression. Like, in a way that I've never heard it before because you haven't, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we can't make that assumption for our clients. And I think that's one of the biggest things that most of us do is like we create this branding thing in a vacuum where we're like thinking, oh my God, this is how they want me to look like. And it's like just
Strike a pose, you know,
right.
like
And it's like the, you know, the yoga poses and all that. And if that's your thing and if that's really what you're passionate about, great. But just because somebody's doing a handstand in their branding marketing pictures doesn't mean I have to do a handstand or wear Lululemon or whatever. So it's like if me and you were to walk into Lululemon, I can't assume for Brittany that she's not going to want to buy the $70 pants. Like I might think, oh my God, this is so expensive. And I think Brittany can't afford this. And then all of a sudden you're buying 3 pants because you're like reading about how it's made with seaweed and you really like the colors and you like the feel and you like the story behind what's happening, you know? So
yeah. Yeah, I
don't
think you
assume.
explain it beautifully. And I mean, also let's talk about 3,000, 4,000, $5,000. If you can
Right.
help me with like my deepest, biggest problem to actually, and not even necessarily to solve it, but to shift it so that
Yes.
I can then work through it. Oh my gosh, let's talk about a bargain because most of us, whatever our deepest, you know, deepest problem is, we deal with it and struggle for it with it for years, right?
Yeah.
So what you've just told me is that this is a this is really a bargain for people to work to work with them, like to solve these bigger problems. And part of that is when they position themselves, as you said, as the expert, not just the person who has like the 200, 500, however many hours of certifications, or you know, the all the add-on certifications that you get afterwards, but the person who's actually able to help someone, able
Right.
to help someone through a problem that they have. That is powerful.
Yeah.
And that is why you need storytelling in your business, because when you tell that story of how you can help people shift, there's nothing people want more than to shift out of their biggest pains and problems and challenges. Like they sit in that all the time. And so if you can actually help them shift, if you are gifted in that, then you are depriving people by not telling your story. you're
right?
depriving people by not sharing that with the world. So yeah, it is
And the thing is,
definitely
it's like, I
important.
think what, so then if we take it like a level deeper, right? And understand like, well, okay, well, what, so, okay, so I have to talk about my experience, my professional experience and my life experience and talk about the pain. Okay, so wait, how do I do that? And so I think what you said is we need to touch on that pain, right? Because certain people, it's like so many people are going through. I was just talking to a client yesterday, and he was saying, you know, I was at Thanksgiving dinner in Canada. It was Thanksgiving on Monday. And, you know, I wasn't even thinking about branding and blah, blah, blah. But my cousin was like, hey, what are you up to? What are you doing? Like, and he's like, well, actually, I'm offering this program for clients men specifically who are burnt out. And then she said, oh my God, like, you know, so-and-so needs that. Her husband, like, he needs that. And then he started interacting with the story, right? With his experience, with the fact that what he's doing. And he said to him, like, okay, so like, how the heck does yoga, how would that help me? And here's a nuance that was so, that differentiated my client in his expertise. He said, he was saying that, but what I really heard him saying was, I'm so fucking exhausted. I can't even think about doing yoga. So what are you talking about, man? So
Yeah.
just the fact that my client was able to even see past the superficial kind of question positions himself right there and then as the expert, and his ability to continue to ask him questions and lead him a little bit closer to the truth, which was, it's that he's so exhausted that he can't even fathom doing anything for himself, and on even a
Mm.
deeper level, even giving himself permission. So it's like he understands his clients so deeply that he understands that they're these highly driven people that actually don't allow themselves to stop. So it's like, imagine all of that in one question. Like, that's what was so special and unique about my client and his expertise. And when I kind of mirrored that back to him, he was like, oh, right. Because the imposter syndrome, like, oh shit, now I don't know how to answer the question. But it's like the fact that you saw all of that, like, not everyone will see that. Like, I would maybe haven't even seen that, even though I teach yoga, because I
Yeah.
don't necessarily work with that specific clientele. So it was pretty potent.
Yeah, and with burnout, there's another aspect of it too, whereas like yes, you want to identify their pain, but you also need to help them feel like their desire is real and it is accomplishable. Like there has to be an element of hope in there because
Yes.
burnout completely overwhelms you, which is why I think it's really good when you're storytelling to talk about the pain, but you also have to offer hope. And
Yes.
so, and sometimes, depending on who your clients are and how you work with them, you almost need to lead with the hope more than the pain. It really is
Right.
a fine line. And that's why it's important to think of this as a relationship, because any way you choose to talk about what you do, it only actually makes sense. It only is like good branding, good messaging if it lands in the ears of the other person and actually hooks them, right? Like it like pricks their heart so that they're like, this is me. This is
Mm,
what I need, and this is why I need to get this help now and not later. Like that is what good branding, marketing, messaging, what it does. And that
right.
is all through the power of storytelling when we
Because I think
identify that need.
the other thing that how we identify that need is when we are telling the story and the person can actually see themselves in that story. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
see themselves in the pain of that, the truth of like, oh, right, that is me. I am that burnt out person who, as much as I want to make love with my wife, I'm so fucking burnt out that I can't even do that. Like, that's a deep, pain that is almost like it is almost scary to say out loud, right? And
Yeah.
but when we can actually, as uh, experts, actually speak to the thing that they're thinking, feeling, and doing on that really deep level that almost can be triggering and super scary, but in a way that's safe, where it's like, I got this. I understand this. I see you. I hear you. I understand your pain. And I'm not afraid to actually look at it. There's something deeply impactful about that. And like you said, Brittany, that, and you may not see it now. You might feel just the exhaustion. But here's my process, my expertise that I've brought myself and my clients through. And here's the light at the end of the tunnel. Here's that hope. Here's that bliss. Here's how to, like you said to me yesterday, even good storytelling is being able to allow your clients to imagine themselves differently
Yeah.
because you have brought yourself through it or you brought your clients through it, right?
Yeah, when I work with my clients, I don't leave the storytelling because we create a story together, right? And I don't
Right.
leave it on this superficial level. I ask them like, and maybe this is a big word, the existential question or desire, but really, what is that big struggle, that big desire that people are like, well, shit, if I don't get, I hope I can swear here. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
didn't. Okay. Like, okay, well then we'll go all for it. What, oh shit, if I don't get this fixed, like what's going to happen? So if you're in
Right.
a deep burnout, that question might be, can I ever feel better? Is
Right.
there anything that will ever make me feel better? And when
Right.
you land on that, it can be expressed as a question or it can be expressed as a desire. Like maybe there's a better way. Like whatever that desire
Mm,
is, whatever that struggle is, that question is, if you can tap into that and create the story around it, then it's really helpful. And the reason I say story specifically is because at a certain level, you need to make it, you need to have like it be almost as real as a movie because these
mm,
people have like this movie of life playing in their head.
right.
And and when you're talking about people with a burnout, it's like my life is always going to be a struggle.
Right.
And so it needs to be something as like real as a Hollywood blockbuster,
Right.
to
Yes.
penetrate that, to get
Yes.
them to realize, no, you don't actually have to live with that. There is a better way to live life and still achieve and possibly even achieve more, I mean, because let's face
Right.
it, if you're an overachiever and you're burnt out, you're not achieving a whole bunch of stuff, or you're
Right.
not you're not doing it well usually, and
And
that
it's
adds
that
so.
that nuance that we keep on talking about, and I'm going to go back to it. Is like, so we can understand what we do, and we might often, I see this, we make the mistake of, so then my client will say something like on his next messaging, not knowing, he's like, I help people with burnout. And but I was telling him, like, if you actually just told that story, and in your client's perspective and how you saw it, that is a whole other like ball game, because what's going to happen is they're going to person on the other side is going to see themselves in the story, or they're going to relate as a character, like you were saying yesterday, Brittany, like a character in the story, whether they're part of that or not. And and they're not just going to feel it, but it's like it's almost going to be like this visceral, deep, almost like unconscious sensation. And what I was saying yesterday to you is like, what's even more impactful, or like really impactful, is like when you have a flashback of like,
Yes.
okay, whoa, like that is actually the flashback in the movie of my life. Okay, then you got your clients leaning in like, okay, this person, especially if they're on that brink of like, I tried everything and I just need somebody who actually understands me on that deep level and can help me. And so when you can touch them from that place and without being afraid that you're not enough or the expert, but just tell them the truth of how you see things, they're going to see the truth that, oh my gosh, you actually understand me. You know what I'm talking about. And you've brought yourself and other people through that experience. So I love how you added, like, to be able to also see yourself in a different light through that lens of hope, because that's where their stuckness is, where it's like, I actually don't even know what the fuck to do anymore. So somebody throw me a
Yeah.
line, because and then I'm reading, like, and they often go through like the Google and they see the psychologists, maybe that, the nurses, I don't know, like they don't know, but nothing is speaking to them, because it's just all of these titles, and it's sort of like this collective idea, like that might help.
Yeah.
But when you actually say it in a story like this, the person starts to become very certain, like, I really think you can help me.
Well, and when we as business owners take ownership of our story, that is very empowering for us as well. I don't share this too often. Well, maybe I should share it more. But one of the reasons I got into storytelling was because when I was back in my earlier ministry days, I had to share my autobiography over and over in front of groups of people as kind of like for a part of different processes that I was going through, like training. And
Right.
so I remember the story one time. I told it so terribly. And I'm not even like I've got all the it was like one way of storytelling that I had learned early in life, but it's
Mm,
very disempowering. So we're not even going to go into that methodology. But I
mm,
remember at the end of it, someone took me aside, and she's actually a Hollywood screenwriter, and she's like, you know, when I write like my TV series, what I do is like I know everything there is about all these characters. I know like her favorite bread, I know her favorite, um, color. I know all of these things,
mm,
but I choose the elements that I tell
mm,
when I tell the story. And when
mm.
she told me that, it was like it clicked for the first time. Like, I am not the victim of all
Yes,
the circumstances in my life, of all the bad elements of my life, or
yes,
even and I don't even have to share all of the good elements of my life. I
yes,
can actually choose to narrate my story in a specific way. And that at
yes,
its essence is branding, choosing how you narrate who you are so that you can help people, so that you can help people the way that you were born to help people. That is what this is all about. It is not about like, oh, I got to look like Lululemon. This is like, oh, I have to be me so I can accomplish this great purpose that I was designed to accomplish in this lifetime.
and you know what I love about that story,
Yeah.
Brittany, is that you began to tell a story. And yes, from your perspective, you're like, oh, well, it's terrible. And I like, I kind of like position myself as the victim, and I kind of don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
But you, you started, and that's the thing that I also want to tell everybody. It's like branding is not all of a sudden becoming this perfect look. It is, let me tell the story. It's messy. It's a creative process. It's a dialogue with the people in front of you, just like that Hollywood screenwriter was so lovingly and gracefully saying, hey, you know what? This is how I do it. And the very fact
Mm-hmm.
that you had the guts to tell your story in as messy and whatever it was, you got feedback. And that's the thing.
Yes.
It's like, my client who was just sitting at the kitchen table, he got feedback, right? And that's what's always going to happen as you tell stories. And you will have so many stories, and this is what Brittany's really expert at, is like, okay, which stories to tell, how, when do you tell it, where do you tell it. But just the very fact that you start telling the stories helps you, because again, you're not doing this in a vacuum, helps you. All right, when I told, like, one of my clients, she has this picture of her doing this back bend because her clients are high performers, and they are like artists, and so a lot of them are dancers, a lot of them are like pro athletes, and she's
Oh, yeah.
particularly an aerialist. And she told this story of her thinking that she had to touch her toes on her head every day. That was her discipline.
Mm.
But one day she overdid it, and she kind of actually hurt her back.
Oh,
And
no.
the amount of people she knew specifically, because like you said, you're intentional, what bread they like, she knew she's speaking to those high achievers who have that kind of very high performance mindset, that don't necessarily understand the edge, right, of what is discipline and what's overdoing it. That story, like in that, the week that I taught her that, she had like 8 clients reach out to her, 8, from
Wow.
that one post, because it was so
Wow.
impactful. They're like, fuck, that is me. I'm fucking gonna break my back if I don't pay attention, right? Literally.
Did she
And so
literally
it's,
break her back? Like literally broke a
well,
bone in
her
her back?
vertebrae, like she basically can't do back bends anymore. She
Oh
still can do
no.
aerial work, And luckily she didn't hurt herself to the point where she can't function like and walk and stuff like that, thank God.
Yes,
But
thank goodness.
you see, like that personal experience and that professional experience it hit so close to those people's hearts. Like you said, it pricked them, it hooked them. They're like, oh, I better freaking wake up, because if I don't, if I continue on my path, so you see, she's showing them this is where you may be. But the good news is, I figured out a way of not bringing yourself to that breaking point. So all of that was received through a story. And she didn't have to say, I'm a special such and such that works with high performance. Like they wouldn't even have cared. Like they go, oh, okay, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm a high
Well,
performer. Like,
well, and look, like I'm not a high performing yogi or anything,
right.
but it hooked me too. I was like, is she okay? Like, can she walk? Like, it was curiosity, I was like, how is she? And, I can
Right.
imagine myself in that scenario. I can imagine myself like maybe not breaking my back, but like getting stuck if I tried to do a back bend.
Right.
And so I'm like, it drew me in too. And that's the power of good storytelling. It draws you in. It is so compelling that you can't just brush it off. You can't set it
Mm.
aside like it's a just a fact. Like it's oh, it's a 200-hour yoga certification, 500-hour yoga certification. Those are facts too, but they're not things that are going to draw you in. They're just titles.
Yeah.
And titles, certifications are important to building
Yes.
expertise,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily help. I'm going to take that back. They do help position your expertise, but
Yes.
they are not the fullness of your expertise,
Yes. It's not a
because
full
they
breadth
are
of your
not
body, your work.
sharing all of, yes, they're not sharing all of you. They're not sharing all of your work. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, and this is what I also tell people, it's like, even though Brittany is not an aerialist and she doesn't do backbends, there's still part of you that can relate to the character, which is not even a character, it's a real life person in the story, where it's like, oh my God, right? Like she's in that pain. How did she get out of that pain? Is she okay now? And
Yeah.
so that's where the hope is, where it's like, oh yeah, I went through this. It was painful. And but guess what? There is a way, and that's kind of how you allow yourself to tell people, this is what I do, guys, and I'm offering it to you. I'm not assuming whether you can afford it or not, or whether you think it's valuable, but guess what? This is what I offer, and
Yeah.
and like that's it. And it will help people say, oh, no, that's not me, or yes, that is me, or that's me, but they're still processing it. So maybe in a couple of months, they're like, oh, that thing you said like 6 months ago, that hit, like I was been thinking about that since like the day you said it, like that's how impactful. When you said good storytelling is remembering, like that's how people remember. They're like, I've been thinking about that thing you said since the day you posted that thing, like I don't even know how long ago, right? And
Wow.
they've been feeling it in their body that long. And then so what starts to happen is that it starts to move people into action, because they start to realize, I need to do something. Because it's also like, when something looks great and fancy and nice, it's great and it kind of feeds our ego. But what do we really want for our clients? We want them to take action. We want them to have some sort of transformation, whatever that may be, right? Discovering who you are, discovering your mark on the world. Me, it's like discovering like how your spiritual practice. And this is a funny thing we talked about yesterday. When you said like this big overall arching story, I thought you meant like, okay, my overarching story for me was, most of my clients have energy around money, energy around marketing, and energy around sales. And that's kind of like the stories that I always tell. And you nuanced it and you said, actually, your big story is, what did you say to me yesterday?
What did I say your big story was? Shoot, I forgot.
It was like you basically said,
But I
you
remember
basically
you
said to
missed
me, and
that
see,
your big
this is the
story. I
huh?
remember you missed the big story, right? Like
Right. I
that was
missed the
what
big
I
story because you told me those are the pillars, Jayme.
Yes,
Those
the
are actually the
pillars.
pillars.
And that's
And
funny, right? I remember not the core message of your story, but I remember how it unfolded. I remember the story of how it unfolded, not the core message, because
right.
I realized at the time that you had missed, and I think it was something around like your people are really asking themselves, can they do business as a spiritual practice? I
Yes.
think it was something like that.
How can
Um,
my spiritual practice be as easeful? How can my business be as easeful as my spiritual practice?
yes, yes,
That's what you were saying.
exactly.
And that was a
Yes.
light bulb. I was like, oh, that's the overall arching story. Okay.
And so
Right.
that is your core message. And when you're, and yes, you pointed it out perfectly. Like you have all of these pillars about energy and all of these other things, and you need bunches of stories to tell there. But having that overall core message of like making business as easy as a spiritual practice, as easy as their yoga, it, once you anchor that not just as a message, but as a story, and
Yeah.
probably in your story about, when you first started out as in your business, it was actually hard for you to think about. I remember when you were doing marketing at the very beginning, doing messaging
Yes.
at the very beginning, it was really
He was
hard for
there.
you.
He was
uh,
there.
and you were really good at it, but it was hard for you to make it feel easy because you
Yes.
were always trying to problem solve, you were always trying to fix. But once you got it to where you felt easy, it was
Yeah.
so beautiful to see how you shared that message with the world. You continued to consistently offer something, and you helped people make that transformation. And so you gave to your clients what ultimately you struggled with yourself, which is so often the case.
Right.
um, I mean, sometimes we help people struggle with things that we don't, but
Yeah.
most often there's a little, even if it's not something that we directly struggle with, there's a little something, a part of my story that is also a part of your story. So, like, I may never have struggled with telling a story, but I did
Right.
struggle with telling my story.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so when I see clients who, even if they can't tell a story, to save their life, so to speak, even
Right.
if
Right. Right.
storytelling
That
is
was
like,
me.
no, you were much better than you gave yourself credit for. But there are people who just struggle putting words together. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, let's step back even from the words and figure out,
Right.
like, how are we going to,
Right.
like, tell me about yourself,
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
they can start telling these random facts about themselves. And like, I'll help them find those words. I'll help
Yes.
them find the story. But
Yes.
it's not because I struggled with words, but it was because I struggled with telling my story well. And
Right.
so
Right.
it's
And you
that,
have the
whatever that
expertise. You have the
connection,
professional experience.
because I've
Right.
studied a long time to learn how
Yeah.
to tell an effective story, and
Right.
and also had to figure it out for myself because it was kind of
Yes.
like a do or
Yeah. Flip
die thing,
flopping.
right?
Right.
Like
Like.
it's like it's like I'm going to make a fool of myself if I don't figure out how to do this, because I have to tell
Right.
my story over and over and over and over again.
Right. Oh, and that's part of your personal experience.
Yes.
So, one, I just want to thank you because Brittany was there from the beginning when I started this whole like, how do I speak about this? And oh my God, now I'm going to talk about business and spirituality. Like, what the hell? And Brittany, if you were to ever work with her, she really has that patience of listening. Because I tend to be like, I talk a lot and I tend to think out loud. And sometimes she'll just mirror something back to me. And I sometimes don't hear what she says. And then she will mirror it back again. So working with Brittany is really beautiful because she has that patience and really like she has a structure. She'll keep on bringing you back onto the point of what makes a good story and how are really going to kind of brand yourself from making your mark on the world. So I want to thank you for that, Brittany, because uh, I sometimes don't necessarily hear it the first time around. And
Hmm.
so Brittany's really expert at that. And one thing that I also want to thank you about is when we were first working on stories and as I was getting better, Brittany would always say like, oh my God, you're getting so good at that. And I think experts, that is one thing that we have that we can see. We know when things are evolving. I know when a downward dog is evolving. And if I validate that, the power in that is extremely powerful and potent because all of a sudden now I don't feel like an idiot. Like, okay. Oh, okay. I actually sort of kind of know, and like just like Brittany was saying, like, no, you're actually really better at it than you think. Like that soothes me. It's like, oh really? Okay. Okay, thank you, right? And that's the beauty of working with experts. We can't be everything, but we know who we are. And if we really start to own who we are, then it shifts everybody's life, including your own, including your client's life, including the lives of your clients. So really, like, all we're trying to say here is be yourself, and no matter what, like, you're going to be perceived, and you are already branding yourself, whether you like it or not, whether you kind of say, well, I kind of do this. Well, we may as well start to step into that power, because we all know, those of us especially in the transformational world, you have so much experience, and you have
Mm-hmm.
given transformation, and just, like, so let's start to find a way that's easy for you to just share that, so that you don't start to think like, oh my God, people are going to figure this out, figure me out. You're just telling the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Just telling the truth. And you're doing it in a way that it's easy. That's what I love
Yeah,
about the work that you do is you make it all look so easy because you choose to have it be easy.
yeah,
That's a gift to overcomplicators, myself included.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So I want to just recap, just so people, because there's a lot here. I'm just going
Yes.
to recap. We talked about, why it's important that to, why it's important to position yourself as an expert, right? Because it's basically just facts. So you might as well just share the fact that you are an expert through your stories. That's what we said. We talked about what makes a good story, and from my perspective, it's really just, and what Brittany was saying is, it helps you feel and help you remember, right? So
Yes.
people want to feel something when they work with people, especially in the transformational place. But even like, if I'm working with Brittany as a branding coach, I want to feel good. I want to feel like, oh my gosh, she sees me, which she did, and she does. So that's important, because I don't care if you have a billion years experience. If we feel a certain way, I am going to remember that, and that's good marketing. And to this day, because I was 3 years ago, no, 3 years ago, and I still remember the way, I'm gonna cry, the way Brittany made me feel. Right? You see, this is
My
impactful.
goodness.
This
You're
is
gonna
how
make
it's
me cry
impactful.
too.
But this is me too, right? I tend to, like, when things touch my heart, I cry. That's how I express. So there you go. Here's being you, being truthful. What is a brand? And a brand is, again, having a feeling about it. Like, I just had a feeling about Britney's brand, which was very authentic. It was not something I tried or made up, or, oh, crying is really good for marketing. It's actually how I felt. What else? Um, and then having, like, an understanding of the overarching story, so that you really know who you're talking to. You understand the pain points. You
Yes.
understand their bliss. You understand, like, the hope, so that you're not just kind of, um, that, yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's like, you position you're all of a sudden the victim and you're crying. That's different from what just happened here, right?
Yeah.
It's I've processed that, and it touched me deeply. But I'm not a victim in that story, right? So it's really understanding, like, that overall true story, so that you can be very intentional and really understand who you're speaking to, so that those points, like you were talking about, like, grip that person in the heart. So that is my kind of overall view. Brittany, anything else that you want to?
Yeah. I just want to echo what you said about be yourself, but be yourself in a way that's intentional. You
Right.
you get to choose which bits of yourself that you share so that your audience can actually hear the message, this beautiful work that you're doing, and they can actually participate in it. So that is the most important. Just be intentional the way that you would be intentional with your yoga practice. Be
Right.
intentional in how you choose to tell your story because you have the ability to do this. It
Right.
is within your power.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that revealing of yourself, and the revealing of yourself in truth. Because I could have avoided saying what I said, because I knew that type of thing makes me cry, but I didn't. because I think it's important, especially when it's coming up in the moment, to actually express how you feel about something, because life is precious.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you did as well. I had no idea, and I'm like I don't even cry publicly very much, so I'm like I've got glistening eyes because this is about how I do crying, right? But it's so
Hmm.
powerful to hear that and to hear someone. Thank you for sharing that because I don't think I ever realized how impactful this work can really be. Um,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. So, what's next? We've talked about all of this, why it's important positioning yourself as the expert through storytelling. So, Brittany has something where she can start to get you on that journey, because that's the thing when you have an expert, they set up the container, right? It's kind of like the difference between reading a book and actually working with the author. So if you want to work with Brittany closer and get into her world and understand, like, okay, how do I do this? How do I start to really draw out those parts of my life that are going to be impactful for other people? And so she's going to give us a link of, I think, what did you call
It's it's called a
it's called?
brand manifesto workbook, and what it
Yeah.
will really help people do is start to think about their vision and
Hmm.
their values.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite take it to the level
Important.
of storytelling, but those are kind of the things that you want in the back of your head before you start
Hmm.
deciding what your story is. So that's kind of really the first step. And it's a brand manifesto workbook, and it's my revolutionary presence. I've got a theme going on here, but
Yes.
it's
Yes.
we'll share it. I think I'll drop it in the link below, or in the comments below. I'll drop the link so that people can get their copy.
And it's to the point of, like, when you get really clear on your values, you understand how you're going to show up. And like, that's why we work together, because revolutionary presence is really also what I align with. It's like, I'm going to be me, whether I'm crying, whether I'm excited, whether I'm nervous. I still got to be me, because that's how I feel most at ease with myself. And then that
Mm-hmm.
means that I can be like that with my clients. And then, so there's no surprises. So if you were to work with me or Brittany, it's like you kind of know what to expect. And that's kind of what you want. You don't want to have this kind of superficial branding, and then you get behind the brand and all of a sudden it's like it's something different, right? So you might as well front face who you are right away with courage, right? So that people just, they know what they're receiving, right off the bat.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Brittany. And everybody in this community, you know how to reach me. You can DM me if any of this work resonates with you. If you kind of are having a hard time, bridging your spiritual practice to your business, then you can DM me. Let me know, Jayme, I'm ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call, and we'll talk about why, or I'll send you an application, and how perhaps we'll see, like, why are you stuck, and I'll take you through this whole process. So as you can see, there's a lot of resources available for you guys between myself and Brittany and many people out there. So now the choice is really up to you, right? Of, you know do you want to kind of move forward in the world, really position yourself based on who you are. So that's it. Thank you so much, Brittany, for being in my life and this part of my important journey. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here today to share this
Oh,
with your audience and to have this conversation with you, because every time I talk to you, I hear kind of a different aspect of the work, and I love that. I very
yeah,
much love that.
yeah. So may this continue our evolution together and in the world. And we will see you guys next week, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Brittany and I will come back, answer all your questions. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Brittany. Thank you.